It has implications for the immediate region, namely the entire North Caucasus region is a tinderbox of different ethnic groups, of different communities, not only in Georgia, but in Chechnya, in Ingushetia, in Dagestan, with different separatist intentions among those groups. And what happens in Ossetia, what happens in Abkhazia, in Georgia, will be instructive for the other separatist regions, both in Georgia and in Russia. But it also has broader...
So essentially in South Ossetia, it suits the Russians because of the affinity of many people in South Ossetia to Moscow to engage. But in the other regions, would Russia pick and choose which would be most beneficial for them to support?
Well, I mean, Russia doesn't want any breakaway regions, and we saw the steps that it's willing to take to crush the separatist movement in Chechnya. But what your question pertains to how Russia views not only itself, but its entire region of Eurasia. And I think today there's two mindsets that dominate Medvedev's and Putin's Kremlin. One, they're not unhappy that the Americans are distracted and bogged down in Iraq, with Afghanistan, and with Iran. And second, they have almost an exaggerated notion of their own ability to shape things and to control things across Eurasia. And that's seen in some of Russia's actions in Estonia, in Ukraine, and now most recently in Georgia.
And given Russia's huge wealth of supplies of energy, is this the imperialist Russia we're now seeing that many critics warned of?
Well, many people say that this is a manifestation of an imperial nostalgia within Russia's political elite today. Namely, there was tremendous unhappiness amongst the Siloviki, the elite now in control in Moscow, about the demise of the Soviet Union. And success would be seen in some kind of resurrection of what had been the former Soviet Union or the former Soviet bloc. This runs in contradiction with Georgia's and Ukraine's aspirations to join NATO, and what happened today between Georgia and Russia directly pertains to Georgia's NATO aspirations.
Well then, where is the potential in this, either to be escalated or to de-escalate?
Well, the potential is seen, I think, in the parties involved and whether they can sit down and work through a framework based on the notion that there is no military solution to this question, but more generally, it's based on the notion of whether Russia can see that what's happening in its neighborhood, what's happening in Georgia, in Ukraine, are not democratic movements sponsored and created by the United States, but instead what's happening in Ukraine, Georgia, and elsewhere is a natural part of the evolution that has occurred in Europe writ whole, namely countries gravitating towards democracy and the free market and insisting on national sovereignty.
Where do you think the mediation is going to come in? I mean, the EU's been talked about. Do you believe they'd be credible?
I think it's most likely going to come from the Americans, because only the Americans have the credibility, both with the Russians and the Georgians, to kind of see this through. The problem with an EU solution is that each one of the separate European countries today are trying to strike their own deals with Russia, and that's not lost on the Georgians.